What is up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook video about the big, ugly implosion. Big, bad, nasty, no good, very ungood time. The big, beautiful bill. What it means: elite looting, the shredded social fabric as Rome burns in dumpster fires, and the U.S. downward spiral that it is on. Happy Independence Day. I guess it's late, but anyways, I hope that you were reasonably safe during the Independence Day wherever you are. And many people did not necessarily celebrate the situation and their country. I've seen a lot of less than happy Americans and not Americans out there, U.S. Americans and Central and South Americans, not too happy with the state of their country, or the country that is on them, I guess, kind of smothering them across the earth. And so, but yeah, I kind of wanted to kind of talk about, obviously there's a few images in this screenshot. One of them is the ICE, some of the anti-ICE, the anti-internal secret police. They really are secret police in the ways that they have been going about things, which is to show up with no identification, with no badge, not refuse to give identification, and then there are also people who are just showing up that are not even. It's unknown who exactly the people are. So this is something that has happened historically. Central South America, this is like having secret police. One of America's beloved international heroes, Jair Bolsonaro, was the head of one of these secret police under brutal far right regime in Brazil. He's now eating Kentucky Fried Chicken in Florida, which is, very American, very USanian thing to do. Support a horrific far right extremist and then extract him into your country and have him build up your far right extremism further inside your country and be a global harbor for that kind of activity. So that's part of the big ugly implosion is. There's a lot of those people that are in the United States, are from around the world. Whether they are the far right separatists like Tsai Ing-wen, who congratulated Donald Trump in Taiwan, in the DPP party, that's not looking too strong. That's imploding. They work in the United States. Whether that is Rabia Kadir. She was the sixth richest woman in China. She moved to the United States to work with the Victims of Communism Foundation, also known as fascists, and the U.S. Pentagon and the U.S. intelligence agencies. I don't know how that strategy doesn't look like it's going too good, but the former president of Afghanistan, who escaped the tarmac with $169 million in a briefcase, a bunch of his US dollars spilled all over the tarmac while he was running away from the multi-decade bloody, absolutely war criminal fiasco that was the Afghanistan so-called war on the T word. And I'm not talking about trans people, obviously. War on the word you can't say. and he came to the United States or went to the U.S. The U.S. is safe houses around the world. Some dollar tax haven and war criminal and corrupted elite hideout. Some Italian palace somewhere. I don't know where exactly that guy is, but anyways, so and all those kinds of people, right? And all of those internationally, the U.S. is imploding. Like its ability to get its will, the U.S. empire, right, to get its will, to impose its will, to make sure that the world moves the way that it wants the world to move, which is to say, to the benefit of the world's most corrupt, the most horrible, and the richest that work through the United States. I was talking about Rome burning. So the Rome, we just watched Gladiator 2. So a lot of this is, refracted through the lens of that Ridley Scott Antiquities tour de force. But and like Rome, the United States is a place where many people can, right, even former slaves of Roman generals, right, and the Roman general was from what is now called Spain originally, right, and he became a general later, Maximus, right, in Gladiator 2. And he came to Rome to be all he could be, which is to be a genocidal conquistador, mass murderer, to expand the Roman Empire. That's actually what Maximus, the beloved, the beloved not son of Marcus Aurelius, or in the movie, and his antagonist in Gladiator 2, which is interesting, is a former I think he was from a place called, was it Numidia? There's some North African peoples, right, that are captured in Gladiator 2 from Numidia, which I believe is today called Algeria. The same area would now be called Algeria. And Denzel Washington's character was a former African slave of the so-called great Maximus, the general, played by Gerard Butler, who says, well, I am here to restore Rome to its true glory, which is a place where the most ruthless, the most absolutely moralless, unscrupulous people who seek power and money by extension, that's part of it, right? Actually a big part of it. I think at one point Denzel Washington's character in Gladiator 2 says he puts up his prize fighter, right, that is the protagonist of Gladiator 2, against another wealthy Roman elite, right? And the capitalism was, I make this point many times throughout my YouTube videos and elsewhere, that the capitalism had already existed long before Marx documented it in the late in the 1800s. It's even in Gladiator 2, right? To acquire vast quantities of wealth was part of the acquiring of power and fame and prestige, right? To become a great Roman, you required wealth. And so you actually see that the horse trading, where the wealth that is acquired through the slavery, right, or just workers paid the optimum wage, right, in a Marxian analysis, right, in a dialectic, in a socialist communist Western analysis, to be slavery is just the optimum form, right? So Denzel Washington's character was paid $0 an hour to harvest, agricultural products for his master, right? The black slave harvested for the Roman general, right? Every free man of Rome and also of Greece, they required slaves, right? Hyper oppressed workers to accumulate the wealth with which they would use that wealth. Like, for example, like I think the gladiator Denzel Washington is paying Lucius, right, money, and he's like, if you commit just a little bit at a time, if you get enough money, potentially you could maybe free yourself, and then you could own your own slaves, right? The right to own slaves, right? And then you could oppress other people and extract their labor value to, right, buy your own statues, buy a beautiful house next to the Colosseum, right? Have a harem full of women or men or whoever you wanted, right? And so that capitalist system, that was a Greek system, you can see it actually really in Gladiator 2 very strongly. And also I think there's a line in Gladiator 2 where it's, speaking of implosions, where let me get a picture of that for a second. And the protagonist says Rome is a diseased place. This is a horrible place. It should have just ended right after that. And not just because the Caracalla, Emperor Caracalla, this kind of homicidal, unhinged, bloodthirsty ruler, literally has syphilis or some kind of disease that is rotting his brain, that was acquired through his loins. That's what his brother talks about. No, there's a part where he says where is it? Rome. Like they're coming through the city. I'm trying to find a picture of it, and it's like the city looks like America, right? Gladiator is like Rome. But they're coming to the streets. They're like riding in a wagon. I'm not gonna be able to find it. Like inside it is very much like the United States. Inside of Netflix, everything looks like Friends, or it looks like a great, it looks like Leave It to Beaver. In the reality, right? In the Hollywood version, right? Hollywood is just the Colosseum for the bread and circus, right, of the modern capitalist, imperialist, racist empire. Where's the external? I want to get what it actually says, that line. Okay, I might not be able to find it, but there's like they're only giving me the prettiest shots. But like when you actually see the streets of Rome, right? It actually looks really bad. Like there's homeless people everywhere. There's people that look like they're on opium because opium was available. There were substances people were using. There's just disease and sickness everywhere, right? And then if you're an elite in Rome, then you had a lavish palace and you had Praetorian guards, you had soldiers, right? Today you have cops and you have ICE. Today, the Western capitalist, imperialist, racist elites have ICE and cops and the U.S. military and private security, Secret Service, right? The Romans had Praetorians. They had their elite soldiers, right? And it begins with like Pedro Pascal's character is reluctantly being sent, another general being sent off to crush and annihilate Numidia, right, which is an African proud country, and they're sacking a fortified city from the sea, and just as the United States is sacking the entire Middle East, trying to start a proxy war with China, trying to fight wars against the Ukraine. Or proxy wars against Russia, and all around the world there's 800 military bases across the entire earth, overstretched. The difference between Gladiator 2 and the United States is the United States in Gladiator 2, the Pedro Pascal's Roman general wins the war and conquers a territory. The United States can't really do that anymore. They just lost to Iran, like I pointed out last week. Through their, the collective imperial nexus, with the full support of the U.S. and Britain of their GENOCIDAL settler colony in West Asia. They lost. They failed, right? So like, so if I can get that. Yeah, he plays. This is not just a Gladiator 2 review, although it's partially going to involve that because General Acacius, that's his name. So General Large Assiduous Tree, no, General Large Tree, General Big Tree, Big Beautiful Tree, no. General Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal, is he's attacking. So I can get that city attack. He's attacking a city on the orders of the Imperial Caesar elites, right? Because they seek increasing glorification of themselves. They seek, it's like kind of like Americans launching wars to get their ratings up, right? They also just seek glory, and also there's wealth to be had, right? Every time they sack a city, you can acquire more slaves, you can acquire more resources and territory. Everyone has to render the denarius. They talk about the denarii in it as well. Today, the denarius is the dollar, right? The dollar is also losing its power in the world. I don't know if you noticed. The U.S. had the worst. The U.S. world denarius currency has had the worst start of a year in 4 decades, I think, many decades, since the U.S. got off the gold standard, and became a global fiat Roman imperial world reserve, became a fully imperial world reserve currency with exorbitant privilege, backed by infinite money printing at the core, which is what the Romans did through clipping their official coin of the realm, dropping the silver content in their silver Roman coins with their Caesar heads to 1/18. It was half and then a quarter, and towards the end it was like 1/18 or 1/20 or less the amount of silver, and inside was just sawdust, mirroring the hearts and the souls of the Roman population, and certainly the elites, and the hollow emptiness of the Roman economy towards the end too, which was also collapsing. And the Roman military, much like the U.S. military, is imploding in its capability to exert its will through military force across the world. And so, anyway, so yeah, in the attack though, they sack a city. The closest to this would be like the Iraq War phase, because the United States did destroy and crush Iraq, which was a smaller country among other countries. It did militarily, use Air Force, Marines, naval power, air power, and then also boots on the ground to kill 1 million Iraqis in the horrible, highest crime against humanity, war of aggression. And so this is like I would say Gladiator 2 is almost like Gladiator 2's Rome. It mirrors the United States 20 years ago, maybe. The U.S. now is even further along than in its Roman implosion timeline. But anyways, let me get off of that because we'll come back to the present. But yeah, but in the same way that Rome burned, because I did mention the Rome burning in dumpster fires, and I'm not talking about Italy. I'm not talking about the Vatican sending up plumes of smoke to elect new religious leaders. I heard the Dalai Lama is instead. No, we're not going to. We're not going to ask. We are not going to enter a state of nirvana. We're not going to, have any kind of wise teaching. We are not going to find bliss and solve the secret to happiness and the meaning of existence in Tibet, right? No matter how many 1990s Keanu Reeves movies that you watch about Buddhism, that's not what's happening in Tibet. What the Dalai Lama is going to do is it's going to give to the finance bros the future reincarnation option is open to, and by extension, the U.S. empire, which has always used that as a weapon just as it uses the unsinkable aircraft carriers of Isn't Real and Ukraine and Taiwan and any other proxy you can get, including all of Europe, by the way, to do its bidding and sacrifice their people and their economy. Just as the Romans pulled in the indigenous people of what is now called Spain, which is what Maximus is, actually. He was an indigenous person to Spain, and then he became a Roman, right? Denzel Washington's North African was indigenous to Africa, and then he became a Roman. He became a slave, and then he saw... The difference between that, the United States is... Well, I take that back. Obama became president, so it is possible for modern Americans, despite the extreme anti-blackness of the last 400 years, to become a Caesar. Because Obama did become president. So, and at least for a bit, Denzel Washington becomes the Obama of the Roman, the 2,000 years ago Roman Empire. So, and of course, but that doesn't stop the implosion, right? Obama did it. He may have slowed it slightly, but that did not stop the implosion. Having a little bit more diversity in your terminally capitalist, imperialist, racist, barbaric lifeways, that does not solve the internal contradictions, does not solve the external issues. It does not deal with the quote-unquote barbarians. Now, of course, China, Russia, and Iran are the barbarians, right? The BRICS and the SCO and the multipolar world and Africa as a whole is the barbarians for the today's Western imperial system. And they cannot be stopped by it's not that they cannot, they have not been stopped. And now is the moment of the implosion, right? Or now is not the moment, but now is the continued acceleration of the implosion of the U.S. as an imperial system, and the loss of the U.S. dollar's usage, which is dwindling by the day. The loss in soft power. China, the majority of the world now, over 50% of the world's population see China in a positive light, which is the number one peer competitor to the United States. And the U.S. is less than 50% and dropping fast, very fast. People are fleeing the United States in droves. The United States is racked with all kinds of financial problems, social problems. It struck me. I think it's like, the trash on the street is not, the problem is not that it's trash on the street. That's part of a strike. So I just, I'm going to be clear on that. I support the strikers, obviously, as the modern Roman slaves, not quite fully slaves. Although in Louisiana, predominantly black prison, basically slaves that are rented out by the Baton Rouge and other cities in Louisiana. Governments are leased out from these, they're basically like 1800s chattel slavery, slave plantations. They lease out black prisoners to handle the garbage. They've been doing that a long time. I think there were some non-prison slave trash, what do you call it? There were some non-prisonal slave municipal waste workers. When they went on strike, they were all replaced with the black prison slaves. So, and that's very Roman too, right? It's just, harvesting, and very Greek, harvesting people that are viewed as non-Greek and non-Roman, which is Asian, what they call Afro-Asiatic, so North African and West Asian. So that's, the area that's now called Palestine. That's the Levant region. And they would harvest them and bring them in to be the workers, right? The difference between the gladiator time and today is during the gladiator time, they go and they sack an African country and then take the slaves back, the black slaves back to Rome. Because Africa was just south of them. The United States doesn't necessarily go to Africa and bring back slaves today. but it destroys Central and South America with NAFTA, with austerity, with U.S. world IMF loans, U.S.-backed coups, cover revolutions, literal military intervention in the case of Guatemala, etc. Destroys the economy and the quality of life in South and Central America, so that people are forced into caravans, forced to fleeing their country from under the Monroe Doctrine. That's literally the policy of the Star-Spangled Roman Empire, to force those in South America to loot the resources and loot the people, right? Not quite as directly as this, but to bring the people in as quote-unquote illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants to do basically all the essential labor, right? Which is still the case. Actually, that's part of, like, there was a recent I think it was on like Haymarket Books channel, where there were multiple immigrants talking about, and this is known facts, that the majority of the people that actually do the actual essential work, right, the non-BS jobs, right, which is, in both the BS jobs, trying not to swear, was a book written by the American Central or South American leftist author David Graeber, but basically that the BS jobs, which is about 60 to 70% of the work of the global North, and especially and definitely the United States as part of that, which is predominantly done by very low melanin count, on average flower colored, higher educated personnel in the United States. These people who in 2020 were able to remotely work, right? So these are office jobs, these are market finance, insurance, real estate, choosing a different color of cerulean or sky blue for this year's Walmart logo, right? Or maybe we use canary yellow for the Walmart bags this year, right? And millions of middle and upper class, predominantly white Americans do that for a living, and that counts towards GDP. But that's not really, it's a lot of those jobs are not necessary, and many of them, they provide net negative value to the world, right? Such as bankers, right? They're extractive jobs that just parasitically suck wealth up towards already privileged millionaire and billionaire classes, and the people that work in those. Accounting is just mass legalized bean counting crime, and right, which is very Roman as well. That's basically what Rome was. It's just a giant parasitic entity for the people seeking money and power to come in and try to climb the ladder, stepping on other people's faces and stomping on their faces forever. Like the boot stomping on the faces forever, unlike what Western intelligence-funded writers would say, is not some foreign country. It is the capitalist, imperialist, racist, oligarchic Western centers that don't necessarily have one strong leader. They usually have a Senate. The U.S. has a Senate, and Rome had a Senate. Doesn't make them democratic in an actual doing the will of the masses sense. It makes them chaotically plutocratic, actually, right? Anyways, so. But the people that do the actual work, not the people that go to offices and overconsume Prada and iPhones and burn the planet, right? Going on vacation twice a year. I mean, not everybody can afford to do that nowadays. This is one of the differences. But the people who still can, right? The people who still have at least some familial wealth they're passing on, that have a college education, and they're not immigrants, they're not undocumented immigrants, right? Those jobs are not critical to the economy, right? The Hispanics that actually harvest, the predominantly Central South Americans and Indians and other immigrants that harvest agricultural products like tomatoes and the onions, they pick the kale that goes in your wrap, right? The ones that cook. And these people also predominantly got sick and died when they were forced to go to work in 2020, right? During the the COVID, PANDM. I don't know. Can you say that nowadays? I can't remember. PANDEMIC. When everyone was getting sick in 2020 and there was shutdowns, they started to go to work, right? That's how you could tell whether you were the actual working class, the slave class that is really doing the actual work or the critical work. It's not to say that everyone else's work is not work. I mean, a lot of it shouldn't be done. A lot of it is BS. It's about 50-60% of it is. But those who drove the trucks, those who worked they were forced to work in the restaurants. They were forced to work to work in the factories, in the farms, right? Separating the pork shoulders and the chicken shoulders, right? Packing the vegan cheese into the containers, delivering that to you, stocking it. All of those people, that's the critical, actual critical workers, critical labor. Those are virtually, overwhelmingly staffed. We're also like nursing, a lot of healthcare, a lot of construction work. All the critical work that needs to be done is done by immigrants, right? Those people are pulled from outside the United States into the United States, and because they can weaponize your classification, right? Now, partially that's skin color, and partially that's just literally where you were from, right? And they can weaponize that to pay you as little as possible, like $2 to $3 an hour, and to minimize your ability to organize your labor and strike, right? And so that's where like actually that so the support of immigrants and the anti-ICE actions like are very important. And I was listening to like one of the like, longtime immigrant advocates during a Haymarket Books panel discussion was talking about like the left in the United States it's a good, it's great and it's has many well-meaning people, but the critical workers, a lot of them don't speak English very well, so the left in the United States needs to become multilingual. It's going to be a lot of fun to learn a lot of new languages, because most of the laborers that actually keep the economy running and keep the society running, they don't speak English as a first language, which is an important point. So people that are, people who are able to telework because of their either part of labor aristocracy or, they have a little bit more privilege, right? If you do have a job where you had an option to telework in 2020, 2021, when there were the lockdowns, then you're more privileged than the people that are doing all the actual essential work that could not, or if you could take off during that time, or your situation changed, then you're not, you have to recognize that there's a privilege, and there is a level of BS to your job. If your job didn't need to be done, it was not essential. Not that it isn't work, or not that it isn't necessarily good, but it's like it's not. Like, as an example, if you want to leverage power to actually alter this big ugly implosion, right? Which is going to take people, it's going to take mass collective people power to really do anything, and working people's power, right? That can be used to fight back against the corrupt elites that are shredding the social fabric and looting the coffers and looting the entire country, as Rome burns in a dumpster fire. If you want to do something about that in the United States, you will need the workers, which are key to, they actually have the most leverage in the society, which are immigrant workers. And so, right, because it's just like if bankers and university professors, and that's not necessarily university professors and educators, that's great. But if university professors, bankers, and marketers go on strike, like if everybody who teleworks went on strike, that's not necessarily going to shut the U.S. economy down. But you know what will? The nurses, all of the farm workers, all of the truck drivers, transportation, actual industrial production, food, and food delivery, if all of that shut down, right, then the United States will be an extreme paralyzed, massive. Then the elites will be suffering massively. Now, a lot of other people will also be suffering as well. But that's you have to have a worker cross class, not cross class, but you have immigrant and non-immigrant solidarity, and you need better community and worker and organizations of the 99% to coordinate all this kind of thing. And so anyway, so that's like a positive thing about the image on the left. But anyway, but that's important to note, which is that like the some people, there are some people on the left that they're a little bit more of the bookshelf type of people who again insist on getting the theory right, and will throw like, I'm not going to organize with any Mexican immigrant that hasn't read the entirety of all of Das Kapital 1, 2 and knows it like the back of their hand, and like that's probably not going to be successful in making any change. Anyway, that's just that's just like a sidebar. But yeah, the big story though is that there's a big ugly implosion, and that there is the big beautiful bill is what is it? Basically, it's hard to even listen to Western discourse without feeling. It feels like your neurons are screaming and dying. It's kind of like getting COVID 8 times, and then having microthrombosis of your blood vessels and omeletification of your synapse clusters. That's what listening to Western discourse is as bad sometimes as using ChatGPT to do all your thinking for you till your brain atrophies into a raisin-sized micro Tyrannosaurus Rex brain. I forget how big the Tyrannosaurus Rex brain, but I know it's not very big. But anyways, so the my point is that there's a lot of talk about what it is and what the U.S. government is doing and what's happening there, and a lot of the electoral politics in the U.S. it's very it's a lot of words. A lot of like political discourse is a lot of words. I think there's a Russian former nuclear sub commander. I think it was like a colonel or a general in the Russian military. Sometimes he goes on these podcasts or on various international left-leaning geopolitical interviews, and he's like, yeah, when the Western discourse, it's like Orwellian. It's 1984. The words are said about our Patriot missile systems are going to. We need to save our Patriot missile systems and not waste them all defending Tel Aviv. We need to save some to defend our ships in the South China Sea when we fight China. And it's like, what are you even? It's like we can't give all of our weapons to Ukraine because we're gonna need some of those. We're gonna need the U.S. air defense missiles, to shoot down the faster than Iranian Mach 15 hypersonics that the Chinese have. Right, like as if like that sentence is just absolute nonsense to start with, right? Everything about that sentence is wrong in 6 ways, and that's the level of discourse that the West is in right now. And it's like either should we give it to Ukraine, or should we give that to Ukraine, or should we keep it for ourselves? Right? It's like it's irrelevant. It's not working in Ukraine, and it's not going to work for you either, right? But that's the level of discourse. It's like the Titanic is sinking. It's like, should we have red drapes in the USS Titanic as it's going under the water? Should we change? Like, that's the GDP of the US, right? Choosing the shade of blue for the Walmart logo, choosing the shade of white for the Apple phone. Everyone's switching to Huawei and the Beidou system. I don't know if billions of people are leaving the Western technological matrix, like I talked about last time in my video on the facts on the ground when it comes to the results of the so-called 12 days war, right, in the Empire of Glass. And so, again, that's another way. Obviously, in an international sense, the U.S. and the empire is imploding. and the imperial system is imploding, and people are fleeing. Right. I was just listening that there's a new report that because of the evidence that using GPS, right, is a weapon, and the Chinese have known this a long time as well, because in the early 1990s, a Chinese vessel was carrying legitimate goods like energy, oil, I think, or products to Iran, and the U.S. switched off the GPS of this Chinese ship in the 1990s. This is in the 1990s, and it accused the Chinese of bringing and arming Iran with weapons of mass destruction, biological weapons, chemical weapons of some nature. And so the United States shut the satellite constellations under the U.S. controlled GPS system, but the U.S. was the only game in town for a long time. And everyone was just using that GPS, right? And so the Chinese ship was essentially stranded for 20 days. And that was the first wake-up call for them. And the United States demanded, and it prevented the ship from properly navigating. U.S. called on all of its vassals in the region to not allow them to the ship to land anywhere, and the U.S. demanded that the U.S. military board the Chinese vessel and inspect it, which they did, and then the U.S. found no chemical weapons, right? But then the U.S. accused China of just trying to defame the CIA by tricking them into sabotaging. The Chinese were accused of tricking the United States intelligence community of making America shut off the GPS, commandeer the Chinese ship, and trick them into looking bad because they didn't find chemical or biological weapon. There was no sarin gas, there was no COVID-19 on that. I'm just kidding, but there was no bio or chemical weapons of mass destruction on the Chinese ship. So then the United States basically just spread in there, which the corporate media and the narrative power and the soft informational matrix, right, was much stronger back then. But anyway, long story short, so that was this wake up call where China realized, okay, well, we're going to need to not be using this United States GPS, among other things, all Western technology. We need to have our own completely sovereign technological informational communication ecosystem, and I'll talk about that in this video a lot more. But so today, one of the fallouts, right, is that the Chinese now have the Beidou satellite network, which has in excess of I think it's at least 10 more satellites than the US, which is it's a more powerful GPS network, the Beidou system. It has accuracy up to the centimeter level. The United States GPS only goes up to what within a meter accuracy. The Beidou also it comes with it the Chinese foreign policy, which is the cardinal rule, like the number one rule of their the way they relate to the rest of the world, right, is not to meddle in other people's countries. It is about respecting territorial integrity, right? It's non-interventionist, right? Like they even to the point of China gets accused of why didn't you intervene more for Palestine? Why didn't you help Iran more? Why don't you intervene more over here and over there, right? But it's actually kind of China actually takes flack for that, not intervening enough, right? Which is very anti-Roman, right? The Roman way is we just, wherever anyone is, we go to their house, we burn their house, we take their people as slaves, we take their children, right? And then one day they become Maximus, right? And then they do gladiating. And then they do GENOCIDE, they do imperialism, right? So the Roman, the Western way, the American, the Roman, the British, French, Spanish, imperial, the Dutch, the Holy Roman Italian way with its billion brainwashed, mind-controlled Catholic churchgoers, or the Protestant church. The Western way is everyone becomes one of us, and everyone follows the highest, most powerful, corrupt, murderous leader, right? Whether that's the Denzel Washington, absolutely ruthless power seeker. He says, "Hey, when I kill people and lie and it caused the deaths of millions. That's just politics, right? That's Hillary Clinton. That's just Obama. That's George W. Bush, right? That's right. So you either you look up to the most powerful, most ruthless, horrible person in the entire civilization or barbarization, right? Western barbarization, and you have to bow to them, right? You have to do what they say, and you incorporate more and more of their resources and slaves, right? And their people, and you co-opt their cultures, right? And you warp and distort their cultures, right? That's why everyone speaks a Romance language, a lot of Western and Northern Europe, right? It's because they were annihilated and destroyed by the Western capitalist imperialist racist system that Rome arguably perfected in its time, and the U.S. perfects in our time. Obviously, perfect is. I'm not saying it's great. I'm just saying that like they made their system work. They successfully maintained a global hegemon, racist, capitalist, imperialist nightmare for the last 7 years, the United States. But the Chinese don't ask people, like the Chinese, the Chinese don't ask the United States. The Chinese don't ask countries to bow to Xi Jinping and the Chinese government's dictates, the quote unquote CCP or whatever people say it is calling the shot. Whatever people incorrectly call the Winnie the Pooh ridiculousness. The Chinese they actually do believe in like a world where there are various different systems and peoples, and if peoples and countries and civilizations change, they need to their sovereignty needs to be respected, and they need to be allowed to make their own decisions internally. And the Chinese should not force a system onto those other people, and nobody should force a system onto those other people. And to their credit, they do follow that more or less, even despite like backlash to that. Like I just said, like why doesn't China intervene to stop what's happening in Africa, Sudan, and Congo? Why not China intervene to stop what's happening in Palestine, right? But there's many reasons actually, and actually the reality is like they have to defend themselves, and they have to try to fight back against the U.S. system. So there are things that are, they don't necessarily have the vassals and the Roman imperial proxies, right? Like the U.S. does, right? But they do have allies that will work with them. And you could say, well, that's the Chinese are, the Chinese are using soft power, and they're making friends in Africa, which is becoming part of the Chinese empire. And it's like, if you treat your neighbors nicely, and your neighbors speak kindly of you, and if let's say you run out of sugar, and your neighbor gives you sugar, did you do imperialism to your neighbors, or were you just acting like a good neighbor? Like, where does the line between, you know what I'm saying? If you go to your neighbor's house and you shoot your neighbor's dog, and you beat up your neighbor's son, and you pull a gun on your neighbor, right? Which is what the U.S. and Rome and the West does, right? And they say, if you don't give me everything in your bank account, neighbor, I'll burn your house down, right? That's the West. And then you tell the neighbor, by the way, you have to say that we're democratic and nice, right? That's the Western American, British, Caucasoid, Roman way, right? I mean, you can definitely say that's imperialism, because basically every country on the earth has been invaded by the West, and basically every country has had at least one coup attempt, maybe not successful, but just the U.S. alone, the majority of countries have had overthrow attempts, multiple. Central South America, they've had multiple on average, right? Coups, wars, actual debt trap diplomacy, austerity, weaponization of U.S. dollar, weaponization of the GPS system, weaponization of international finance, international media, Western media, right? Weaponization of the military, NATO, U.S., AUKUS, the Quad, I mean, we go over it all the time, but let's go over it. Vietnam, Iraq, Korea, Afghanistan, all Central South American bloody coups, Myanmar, Laos. I mean, what they're doing right now in the Sudan and the Congo, what they're doing right now in what the U.S. did to Yemen several times with all of its vassals in that region, the Gulf states, all of its proxies in the Arab world. Right. So, what I'm trying to say is that, like, yes, people are not trading with the United States, and now they're trading with China, but they were not. This is a map of what countries trade the most. The number one trading partner was the U.S. in 2000 versus China in 2020, right? But most countries didn't have an option except the United States. It was just the GPS. GPS was the only option. It was the only option. There was no other satellite network that could give you very accurate location data where you to pinpoint where your ship, right? So this helps with things like with navigation, with tracking, Google Maps, all of that, right? It has all kind of applications for business, for obviously military applications, civilian applications, right? Just like it helps. Imagine if all your GPS just went off right now and you have to you're traveling, right? It would make things a lot more hectic and harder, right? It doesn't mean people are on average less good at using maps. You also don't have to unfold 25 pieces of paper and like be circling little locations and looking for streets and arguing with your spouse or significant other when you're traveling in a new region in the dark at night in the rain, right? I've done that before, by the way. But be like trying to figure out with my family, looking at a map where the heck we are, right? When we're in like Washington State. Anyway, so, but long story short, the trade has massively increased, but it's not actually because China made everybody trade at gunpoint, right? The United States made everybody abide by the U.S.-led imperial capitalist racist system, basically at gunpoint, right? Under threat of sanctions, under threat of death. 500,000 people starved to death in Iraq under U.S. sanctions, right? 40,000 in Venezuela died from lack of nutrition and basic health care in Venezuela in 1 year. For violating the U.S. empire's capitalist neocolonial diktats, right? China has never starved anyone to death by withholding food and forcing them to use yuan. China has never they haven't done a single military invasion in 4 decades. And the last one is very minor. It's basically part of the U.S. Western meddling in that Southeast Asian region. They have China has one military base in Djibouti, but that's actually at the request of the UN, which is a heavily U.S. controlled organization that's corrupt, including the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, which is complicit in providing to Israel's intelligence agency the exact locations of Iran's nuclear scientists, leading to their assassination, by the way. So the IAEA is a criminal organization that is, right, it should not be allowed to, letting the IAEA in is like letting snakes into your house, right? And then your people die. Your key people die. It is basically a branch of the Western Imperial Intelligence, Five Eyes, is basically all it is. And so and so, but long story short, so like everything that the U.S. has done, because some people say, well, we have to resist the Chinese empire because it's the same as the West, and we shouldn't, like, there's not zero criticisms to be had, obviously, but they're just categorically, empirically not doing. Maybe someday, 5 centuries, 25 centuries, who knows? But those are all hypotheticals, and that's also ahistorical and not dialectical thinking. You could guess what China would do based upon their history as a 3,500 year civilization state that has rarely, basically, it's never operated in a Western imperial way, like Persia also, to a large extent, for a long time. there were some slight increases in its borders for a bit, but the way that Persia increased, there's actually a very good YouTube video on that. It was not the way that the United States, it was not in the same method that the United States increased its jurisdiction. Let me see if I can get that video up here. It's called the video is called "The West versus the Persian Empire." I'm not going to play the whole thing for you right now, but I just want to get it on the screen here. The West versus the Persian Empire, and it points out that the West was described as the birthplace of freedom and democracy and human rights. The average Spartan had 7 slaves, which they would routinely kill in massacres every single year, right? You know, it was like the purge, but for all your Afro-Asia, your black and Asian slaves, literally. Every single year, you would purge, you would kill. They would go on a rampage. The Greeks, not even the Romans, the Greeks, and just with complete impunity. There's no ramifications, right? Once a year, they would just shoot, stab, and massacre hundreds or thousands of their own slaves, the Greeks, just to make a point, to never rise up, to keep them under control. They would find the biggest and the strongest of the black and Asian slaves that the Greeks had, and they would target and kill them. Anyone who looked like they might think about rising up, and they would specifically find something like torture and then kill them. Right? This is the so-called democracy of the West, right? So this kind of it was not the same, but it was ultimately a racist to a large extent, because it was Aristotle himself argued that non-Hellenic peoples were destined by their essence to be slaves, and women were destined by their female essence to be the cooking and cleaning servants of men. That was also right. So the Hellenic women, that's very American, right? It's very Western, and that's why Jefferson based his values on the so-called classical cultures. They're racist, misogynistic, capitalistic, because they all accumulated wealth using their slaves, Spartans and Athenians, and the Romans, and Iran didn't do that. Iran actually had multiple languages spoken. You spoke Greek in Greece. Or you didn't speak if you were a slave. Just like in America, you speak American in America. But in Persia, they had multiple languages. They had multiple cultures coexisting. In Persia for millennia, before even Greece was a dream in the eye of Draco or of Plato. Or anyone else, right? There was no Roman dream when Persia was already a great civilization. That they had huge, medical, mathematics, science, advancements that all gets erased in the way the West tells history, because it's embarrassing how little the West has contributed relative to Persia, a lot of the African civilizations, other Asian civilizations, and also the Native Americans. But anyway, they had basically the first Bill of Rights was actually Persian. It was about the rights. They had no slavery, right? It abhorred slavery. The Chinese also banned slavery like over 1,000 years ago. I forget exactly when it was. The West, it operated on slavery. It invaded other countries continuously to get slaves, to steal resources, just as the U.S. and NATO and the Europeans and their other allies do now. And the Japanese joined in a little over a century ago, right? And anyway, so what I'm saying is that, if you look at that history, and China has never done that sort of thing. Like, they basically have to stay within their borders. Other empires have come through. They built the wall because they were, it was deemed prudent to limit the extent to which would-be Western imperialists, expansionists, slave grabbers, resource stealers, barbarians, actual barbarians, in terms of being brutal, amoral, horrific people. The Chinese built a wall to prevent things like invasions from Khans, attempted invasions from Alexanders, attempted invasions from other external powers, right? But China never had an empire to span the entire earth, even though they could have, because they were the most powerful. They were the number one GDP for basically 1,800 of the last 2,000 years. There's only a brief switch after the Opium Wars in the 1800s, where Britain surpassed China and then the U.S., but it only lasted less than 200 years. It was a century of humiliation, and by now, in purchasing power parity, the Chinese surpass the United States by a long shot, and it's not even close. Like science fiction, Chinese technological, sociological, economic, soft power. The Chinese already have, obviously on the screen we can see that their economic global power. They are the factory of the world. Like you can't make anything, iPhones or the parts and radars for a F-35 without this Chinese economic might. You simply cannot, right? It's not even a question of it's not even a question of will the U.S. win this fight with China? They already lost. It just doesn't know it yet. Arguably, the U.S. lost in 2008 when hundreds of billions of dollars of imploding U.S. and Western rotten paper had to be bought up. The U.S. debt was bailed out by the Chinese, and the Chinese had to grow their economy to stop the global Western capitalist, hyper-financialized global heist of the subprime mortgage era, the no income, no jobs, no assets era of the thousands, 2000s, where hundreds of billions of dollars of mortgages for $1.5 billion McMansions in Florida were given to Applebee's waitresses making $7 an hour, right? And all this global financial rot exploded, and the entire world, the capital system died. Actually, it already died. The Western capital system and the U.S. financial dominoes had fallen already, but it's basically been on zombie life support for the last 17 years, since '08. And it's been dead. It just doesn't know it yet. Even the French said, capitalism c'est fini. It's like, the capitalist system is finished. But the problem was that if the global Western capitalist system was to unravel in 2008, it would have caused potentially millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of people suffering extreme abject poverty, and hundreds of millions potentially starving because of the chaos, and then wars breaking out because of the sudden drop in the global resources and the global economic havoc could have caused potentially nuclear war, right? India, Pakistan, in the EU, Russia region, and anywhere else. It would have caused all kind of chaos and havoc. So the Chinese decided to spare humanity mass immiseration, unlike anything that had been seen before. Right, the United States was basically a suicide bomber, basically, as a country that was threatening to blow everyone up. And so the Chinese said, "Okay, wait, don't hurt everyone. We'll save the world." The Chinese saved the world. They were never thanked for it. They don't even ask for thanks, but they did, actually. From the inevitable collapse of the Western capitalist system that cannot perpetuate it. Everybody knows that. Any economist or environmental scientist, even American and British ones, know these are not sustainable, right? Certainly not at our current level of human civilizational development, technological development. These are not sustainable. The question is how. It's not the question of will the Western imperial capitalist system collapse, but it's how. And so the Chinese said, it actually would have benefited the Chinese to let the West collapse, right? Because they actually had more of their cards in order. Their socialist system was the future. Socialism was Chinese characteristic. They were they still are the largest communist party in the world. 100 million members, by the way. They just surpassed the number in the last week. And the Western system was going to be going away. But the question was, the question is not how. Again, the question is, coming back to the Empire of Glass. The empire is shattered, right? The screens, the intellectual control, the belief in the capitalist system is on the rocks. The system itself was already dead, but the belief in it still existed and it's been, again, the zombie corporations. 80% of the S&P 500, right, the number one U.S. corporations are basically all in the red. They're all zombie corporations, right? J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, during the TARP $800 billion bailout of the late noughties, right? They were already dead. They were zombie banks. Their assets were vastly outweighed by their liabilities. The interest that they're paying on all the loans that they made, the United States, right, and the collective West, the financial system, by and large, was absolutely dead in the water. But if it had all exploded again, that would have been chaotic and full of, caused mass havoc, right? And now the soft power United States, the technological communications hegemony is cracking, right? Like I talked about last week, the use of the Windows is moving to Harmony OS. The use of Chinese operating systems, the use of iPhones and Samsung Western controlled and operated communications technology is migrating away because obviously, right? 3,000 people were destroyed because they were using not even American, but like Western, like Taiwanese manufactured semiconductors going into chips, assemble and final production in Europe, right? And these pagers, right, were detonated in Lebanon. That was just one of many, right? CrowdStrike, I made a video about that too. CrowdStrike showed that even the so-called antivirus software security, computer security software, like CrowdStrike, right? Which is, by the way, that was the same organization that propagated the Russian hacking stories and North Korean super cyber warfare teams and the Chinese CCP, like almost like Commander Cobra's digital army were coming for you, and only CrowdStrike can help defend you. They propagate a lot of stories to sell more of their products, and their own system caused billions of people to have their flights delayed, right? To have hospital. Remember the CrowdStrike fiasco? Billions of people across the world, in India, in South Korea, across the world, U.S., in Europe, Australia, they all lost their, like even the Vegas ball had your PC ran into a problem and needs to restart, blue screen of death because of the incompetence of the U.S. imperial system and all of their the military, technological, intelligence industrial complex, including obviously the Teals and the techno-feudal neo-kings like Teal and Musk, etc., that they make a lot of money from this, but not just them as individuals. The entire Western U.S.-led computing complex, this from the semiconductors to the chips to the devices themselves, the hardware and the software is rotten, it's corrupt, and it's a weapon. It's not only it's breaking, it's malfunctioning. They can't control it. They're charging through the roof, like their military weapons. They're charging billions and billions or trillions of dollars for these hardware. Ultimately, they're making all this money and their software, and it's not leading, like it's in the Cory Doctorow in the Silicon Valley Western science fiction writing world calls it enshittification or becrapification, right? It's digital fecundity. When you go onto your social media in the West now, right? You're devouring fecundity, like AI poo-poo slop. AI itself is garbageware that is just a way to toxify people of colors, communities in places like Texas and cause them to die from asphyxiation on noxious gases put out by the worst kind of fossil fuel energy generating facilities. And it also uses Kenyan slaves. And it also, I could go on that forever, obviously, is decreasing your intellectual capacity by the day every time you use it. And it's also telling you the Kwisatz Haderach. And also, if you read a lot of Orson Scott Card, you're the Kwisatz Haderach. You're the player of games. You're Ender, And if you read a lot of tarot and you're more femme presenting, then the AI tells you that oh yes, the next evolution of humanity is coming through you, and we're going to enter the age of Aquarius is coming, and you have to just keep giving Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the tech billionaires lots of your money, and having ChatGPT be your therapist, partner, spouse, child, parent, and your entire Kool-Aid drinking cult membership, which is apparently what AI is for, is to build your own personal unhinged cult. Well, the West is just a series of cults, so that's normal for the AI to. It's just a big data pattern recognizer and a pattern repeater, and so it is repeating the pattern of Western civilization, which is massive, horrific, murderous scams and cults stacked on each other. And yeah. So anyways, so big ugly implosion though. So what I wanted to say was that so that's why people are leaving the West, and that's why the US is imploding, is because the majority of the countries would rather deal with a nice neighbor that treats them like reasonably well. Not necessarily perfect, but if you really bring it to them, like if you, even in Greece, they say, Yanis Varoufakis can testify to this. He said the Greeks were given it was a 65-35 deal for ownership of the port of Piraeus, and there weren't enough protections for the unions and unionized labor, and there's too much subcontracting by private corporate Chinese firms, which they have their own contradictions inside of China and the corporations for sure. It's like a lot of liberal elites that listen to too much Western media, New York Times, and the U.S. Embassy in Shanghai. Those kind of people. And Yanis Varoufakis in Greece, he was a finance minister of Greece. He leads DM25, Democracy 25. And he talked about how, like, when he went to the Chinese and he said, this is not fair to the Greek people that this is 65-35. We should be 50-50, if anything. And they're paying people too low by basically attacking the organized labor in Greece, and that's not fair to us. And the Chinese government basically got rid of all that. And they said they basically made the way that they were dealing. Or they said, okay, well, and they fixed the problem. Giannis said, can you imagine if that was an American or German companies in Greece? Like, just as one example, Germany gave Bolivia 3% of the Germany, not even America. Elon Musk was backing a U.S. intelligence supported coup in Bolivia, and Germany was going to get 97% of the revenue of just the raw lithium to refine that lithium inside of Germany, and Elon was going to get massive profits for his Teslas, and he even said, he publicly tweeted, whoever we want, deal with it, right? And so Bolivia was going to get only 3%. 3%. That's like 1/30th. That's basically slavery, right? Which is normal Western culture. It's like Roman and Americans, right? That's like Denzel Washington working for Maximus. That's Denzel Washington's character, black slave of a Roman owner, played by Gerard Butler, right? You get just enough to live, and then do slavery the next day, right? It's the Roman British American way. And so and China offered them actually 50%. Basically, it's a 50-50 deal, which is like you get technology transfer to Bolivia. This is the deal they get to Africa, Asia, all around the world. That's why people want to work with China. Everybody wants to work with China. Even before they had the level of the technology is just better and it works better now, and it's like the only game. But even before that, they were like, the United States and Germany were basically enslaving Bolivia. The Canadians give Mali only like 2%. It's like it's less than 5% of the revenue from the gold. France gives Niger, or was giving Niger, because now they've taken their country back. France was giving Niger about 1 to 3% of the revenue from the uranium. And the Nigerians were all starving, and most of their country, while 1/3 of Niger's uranium was powering, 1/3 of lights in France, like the Eiffel Tower, 1/3 of the lights on it were powered by Niger's uranium, and over half of Niger didn't even have access to electricity, Okay, and China comes into Africa. They're in most countries now, right? They're all over Africa, as you can see. And they said, well, we'll give you 50-50. We will benefit, yes, because you have resources and you have things we could use, and you will benefit, right? And we will train you how to use technology. We're not just going to keep you poor either. You're going to learn how to use the technology. We train. I just saw an article from an African, by the way, not from an American or a European, about Africa. The worst possible source on Africa is the most anti-black people on the earth. Never trust them on anything coming out of Mother Africa, the birthplace of humanity, from the death place of humanity, which is the Europe and America. So the humanity will survive them, but their life ways will be going into the grave soon. No, but like in China, they're training the engineers in Africa to operate, and in Ghana, in Burkina Faso, they train them how to operate the. They said there's an African saying, I had no idea how to operate this hydropower dam or this solar electric facility. I did not know how to do that. And then by the time that after several years, the Chinese had trained up a whole entourage of the local African people how to do that, and then the Chinese go back. And sometimes the Chinese go back to China and they have like African wives or African husband or whatever. And that's why there's actually did you know there's actually millions of there's a 300,000 person city that's like all Africans from like I forget if it's Nigeria or it's another place. It's like a 300,000 almost all Africans from this one area. In China. I don't have time to pick up all these threads and get images for them all. But long story short, which is that like, so that's a good deal, right? That's a deal that people want to work with, right? Maybe it's not a perfect deal, but any deal is better than Western imperialist, racist, absolute murderous. It's not even just the deal is bad. They will come in and just kill your people. And they have. Like, China hasn't gone into the Arab world and massacred 4 million people. Like, China hasn't gone into Africa and like backed proxies that have just killed millions of people. Which in Congo alone, there's millions of people have died in the last decades. Most Westerners don't even realize how many Africans they've killed. Most Americans and Europeans through NATO don't even realize how many Libyans they have killed, how many Congolese they have killed. And yes, the blood is on their hands because their empires that they supposedly, in the supposed democracies they're in, they are enacting this mass genocide. Let's call it what that is. They just starting to acknowledge Sudan. They're just starting to acknowledge Palestine in the West. But they don't realize, like, there's the entire continent has been and continues to be bloodlet, and now they're getting free. But it's it's mostly with the BRICS, the top 3 BRICS, and especially the top 2, Russia and China's assistance, that they're getting free. Not because the United States and the Europeans saw the errors of their ways. So, of course, people are going to be choosing to not go with the West anyway. People are not choosing to go with the United States and the collective West because, it's a big, ugly deal. And anyway, so that's enough international. Let's come back to the present. So things are imploding, and things are falling apart inside the United States. But a big part of why that's happening is because the U.S. cannot exert its will. It cannot plunder the global south the way that it used to. So it is being forced to extract whatever it can from its own people, right, in the country. That's basically what the big, beautiful bill is, in my opinion, which is that it's basically an attempt to take what is left of America, whatever is left in people's 401k, if you have one, retirement, your personal wealth, whatever you have, take the Medicaid funding, the Medicaid and foods funding, which is necessary because the healthcare. It's not because people are just so lazy. It's just the healthcare and food costs are so high. If healthcare and food costs were lower, people wouldn't need those programs, right? But it's just like, we're going to take the money that you have and stick it in our pocket, and everybody can just die. I mean, it's basically what it is. There's no plan to reindustrialize, right? Again, like we talked about in the last several videos, they've gutted the National Science Foundation, they've gutted the Department of Education, they're disbanding whole entire branch, the NOAA, they're disbanding the weather service, the government tracking of hurricanes. That's having bad impacts because people are not able to get accurate reporting on what kind of flooding, rain, and extreme weather conditions are happening in Texas. Just I heard there's a flood they were blindsided by, and that's not that is also that is not conducive to building a economy. That's not going to make America great ever. America was never great. It should be make America great. Mag F, make America great for the first time, right? Make America great again is, again, a misnomer because there was no great America ever. But make America great for the make America great for the first time. Even that is not possible with this current trajectory, right? The even economically, go say, well, this is extremely racist, it's extremely totalitarian, it's extremely, fascist, and, certainly it's all those things. But even in an economic sense, right? There's a really ugly ways to build wealth. This is the thing, but even if you round up 1 million people and put them in prison labor camps, you already have 2 million prison slaves. Even if the U.S. was to round up 1 million or 2 million people and add them to these giant detention facilities and threaten them with gators being chomped by alligators. A lot of this is like just for the media again. Like listening to Western press or Western discourse is just it is just like outlandishly out of touch with reality, just in general. And but they are definitely building prison facilities. Even if they were to follow through on that, the kind of manufacturing that you need to be doing to actually build your economy, right? If you want to compete with China, right? China doesn't use, this is the thing, even the Western American Roman model, right, of having slaves, right? The British model of, having underpaid people in India and South Central and Africa, in your colonies, right, do this grueling labor under a racist colonial system, and then extracting the wealth of that into your British London, and having your tea and having your clothing made by black slaves as a British, right, or having your black slaves in Rome or in Greece harvest your olives or your grapes for you, tend to your fields as slaves. That Western racist imperialist system, it's not going to work anymore, just because of the level of scientific and technological development that the modern world economies are in, right? The Chinese, like this is where the Western copium production of the decline of the United States, of the American, of the European system, which is that Chinese are all using forced labor in all their all the phones and all the iPhones are made with super like $2 an hour or $1 an hour labor. People are being whipped in the back. Everyone's committing suicide. Everyone is the Uyghurs are all being forced labored to make a solar panel, so you can't buy any solar panels. All the cotton from Xinjiang is done under everyone's having their language banned. I mean, we already talk about who bans languages. Like the Chinese have 50 plus languages that they speak, and they haven't banned any of them. The U.S. banned Hawaiian language. I'm a native Hawaiian, just as one example. The Western way is to destroy and punish people based upon their language and culture and ethnicity and skin color, and then enslave them. Are you kidding me? But anyway, this idea that the Chinese are beating America because they have more oppressed labor is itself a lie. Actually, the Chinese, I pointed out in a previous video, how will the U.S. reindustrialize? The Chinese worker at a Foxconn today or in a making Apple phones or making the Chinese Huawei phones that are better than Apple phones, or making EVs, right? They actually make the equivalent of approximately 50,000, 40 to 60,000, around 50,000 a year in US dollars in purchasing power parity terms. And they get free housing, they get free food. It's also high quality food with vegetables. Americans would jump for the free food that the Foxconn Chinese phone making factory workers get. They get it for free. It has vegetables, it has meat. I've seen it. It's like, I would eat that. I mean, it's like, there's like 5 different vegetables, multiple fruits, all kind of spices. It's different every day, and it's free. Every single day it's free. The housing isn't huge, but I mean, you're usually a single person in a city working, and you can work any amount you want. You get free housing, free food supplied by the dormitory system inside of, if you're working in a Guangzhou province, if you're working in a Shenzhen, you're working in a lot of the tier 3 cities. So the inland, non-Shanghai, non-Beijing, not the oldest, biggest cities. A lot of that stuff is done in tier 3 cities now, right? And those cities, it's even cheaper. It's even cheaper to live, to buy a house, to afford everything you need. And you get free food, you get free housing. The healthcare is $1 for a checkup. It's $15 for an ultrasound. To have a baby, it's all like less than $1,000. The whole entire process of having a child. In America, that's tens of thousands, if not hundreds, of over 100,000, depending on how complicated your birth is. So your healthcare is nearly free. You get free housing and free food to make the highest quality products in the world. And you save $50,000 if you don't spend a lot of money on discretionary spending on your, if you don't like buy a new $650 Seagull, which is the $650 Chinese car that I would like to get. There's an electric Chinese car, $650. It has like a Game Boy like interface in the front. It has a pre-installed like Lego brick builder, so you can make your passenger can be playing with Lego bricks on the top. It's a really cool design. Nothing like it exists in the United States. Nothing like it will ever be made in the West at the current rate. And then you could all, so if you don't, as long as you don't spend a lot of money on all these very cheap, high quality products that are better than anything America or Europe has access to at all, period, you can save enough money to buy an entire house in like 2 years. In a very nice city with no threat of fascism, with high speed rail, where the food is extremely cheap and plentiful, and you can get access to it very easily. Fresh vegetables everywhere. They will deliver anywhere in China within like an hour. That's like a lot of the job, because it's so productive and so advanced. They actually have they're actually having things where you can get anything you need half an hour, an hour, and a lot of the jobs are delivering sorts of jobs. They're actually like running out of jobs for people. Like they're getting very close to fully automated luxury communism over there. They have many other problems to deal with. But they're actually like, they have like 23 degree of functionality, 23 degree of motion hands on fully autonomous humanoid robots, unitary robots that use artificial intelligence to guide them and do electrician work in China. They have completely automated greening systems that use integrated robotic vehicles with robotic drones that are undesertifying parts of China the size of Germany as we speak. It's the size of Belgium, and every year and accelerating is being regreened. So climate change is being basically solved. Ecological destruction is being solved in an automated system. And they're like running out of those kind of jobs to give to people, which is another question. So the Chinese are going into more cultural, people are playing in symphonies more. People are like being historians more, which is like what you would, people are pursuing poetry, art, music, design, and exploring and documenting and doing science and physics, working on space exploration, which is what a normal advanced civilization would be doing if it wasn't wasting money trying to destroy the entire planet to benefit the top 0.1% of horrible Caesars, or also known as American oligarchs and global oligarchs, which is what the Western capitalist imperial system does. So if you want to compete with China, if you want to compete with that, right, you would have putting people into oppressed, detention facilities that you're building in Florida or Texas, surrounding undereducated, malnourished, right? The Chinese worker is extremely nourished. The Chinese worker is eating like 2,000 calories, all the vitamin A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? All the minerals they need. The Chinese worker is extremely educated, and you don't have an education system, right? People can't read, and you're asking people to go on ChatGPT and outsource their entire multiplication tables, their long division, the critical thinking skills that nobody has ever really had in the West, but even the attempt to be able to critically think properly, and read essays, even how are you going to like read through advanced technological manuals? How are you going to be trained to operate the complex machinery that it would take to operate the robotic system that the Chinese use to manufacture EVs? If you even wanted to think about competing with your peer competitor, that's not even really your peer anymore. The U.S. is a backwater. The United States is a third world country, right? And it has a lot of potential to do a lot of damage, but it's not actually that powerful in the world. It's very dangerous, but it's in terms of like actually, they say in China, it's not even number 3 on the list, right? The top number 1, 2, and 3 in the Chinese, like what do we need to deal with is, automation and what we're going to do with this huge amount of productive capacity and the economic and technological change is happening so quickly, right? Chinese are dealing with like those kinds of problems. It's like dealing with the advent of electricity and the internet, but like at an even accelerated rate because of how advanced they're becoming. How do we retool people? How do we prepare people and young people to move into these different kinds of jobs and the tumultuous situation that we have now? They're equipped to deal with that because they have a huge they have a system that deals with and cares. They're a civilization state that has a method of discussing actually democratically and then deciding on solutions to the problems that they have. Right? They have like community like on a huge scale there that has never really existed in the West ever. And definitely doesn't exist in the U.S. The best the U.S. has is Black, indigenous people of color resisting the U.S. itself, right? That is where most of the actual community organizations and the actual community building and the people power that exists. But it's not dominant in the United States yet. It's still the U.S. still run by a absolute corrupt capitalist elite and a lot of fascists and various flavors of red and blue fascism and supremacism and capitalism, liberalism, conservatism. Anyway, but it's like automation, demographic changes, dealing with the how to maintain the economic growth, how to balance the rural inner mainland versus the cities. Like those are the problems that they're actually worrying about. They're not worried about the United States, actually. In China, it's like, well, the United States, you can do what you want to do, and we will respond. Like, if you try to do a tariff war, we'll respond, and you will lose. If you try to do some kind of global geopolitical competition, we'll respond, and you are losing, right? That's why everyone's making deals with us and they're not making deals with you because nobody wants to deal with you. Nobody ever wanted to. But now we're an option that people want to deal with. If you try a hot war, you're going to lose because we have even a hot proxy war. The U.S. already lost in one way, a hot proxy war. The 12 days war between Israel and Iran, that was a U.S. proxy war and it lost. The Pakistan-India war was also a U.S. proxy war and it lost again. And any other war, in a certain sense, Russia is not China's proxy, but they're not winning in Ukraine, and that does not bode well for what the U.S. cannot withstand. Is already deindustrialized itself. It's already demilitarized itself. The U.S. has even admitted it's running out of weapons to even give to anyone, right? And the Europeans even talking about we're gonna increase our military spending to 5%. If you spend if you double your military spending, but your money goes to Kajakayas and GNOCID complicit NATO plunderers, like all of these people in Brussels, right? And the money doesn't go to actually make anything competent. What are you going to make it with? China's control the molybdenum, all the rare earth magnets that you would need to make any kind of weapon you might want to make that actually is capable of being effective in the modern 2020s conventional warfare, right? So but yeah, so in the that's the U.S. and the collective West together. But in the United States, like so coming back to that thing of like, if you really wanted to have a big, beautiful change to the United States, you would have to be investing in infrastructure. Actually, you would have to be increasing the spending, and you have to be increasing the spending and increasing the efficacy of the spending, right? So the money would have to be going less to billionaires. It would have to be going less to corporations. It would have to be going less to private individuals. The money, the signal to noise ratio of the money that the U.S. government spends has to go actually to making real things. In that's even beyond just the U.S. budget, right? Because the big beautiful bill is the U.S. 2020, the next year's budget. This is beyond just even where you're going to spend the money. The United States doesn't even have the capacity to not give 90% of the money to corrupt billionaire elites. It's simply it's so terminally, it's like stage 4 metastasized cancer corrupt, that all the money, no matter if you put it in green or if you put it in green money, it goes to Elon's billions and it doesn't actually make any solar panels. Right? America isn't making any solar panels. It's not making anything anywhere near what even if it wants to industrialize, doesn't have the capacity to. And most of the money goes to Elon to fill his coffers so that he can go off about being upset that his trans daughter disowned him or whatever he's going to do today. And all your money goes to Techno King, ketamine, drug highs. And if you give it to the oil, then it just goes to big oil, cocaine, and big oil buying more mansions and just partying and having ridiculous amounts of Humvees and whatever else they do with their money, right? You can't give money to green tech or to science or to oil or to the military. Even the military, you give it to the military, what is it doing? It just goes into Lockheed Martin executives' pay packages. They pay themselves money. They buy another private jet, but you don't get any. There's no actual military productive capacity that's coming out of that money that you spend. So anyway, but that's a whole other, what I'm saying? So like that's like one of like 25 layers of problems that I made a whole thread about all of these problems that the U.S. would have to solve to even try to become a barely functioning country and not just an absolutely collapsing imperial racist capitalist colonialist empire, right? So if you want to actually become a country, but yeah, so the big beautiful bill is not going to do any of that stuff. You'd have to have an educated, activated workforce. They'd have to be well fed. They have to not be worrying about healthcare. See, the Chinese workers don't worry about their healthcare. Chinese workers have all the food, all the healthcare, and all the housing that they need. They get free housing, right? The United States, the American workforce would need to have free housing, actually, like literally, not metaphorically, like literally free housing, because that's what the Chinese worker you want to compete against has, free housing. And the United States is jacking up, the rents are going up to 2,000 plus. Everyone's being evicted because they don't have housing. Those are not the conditions under which you are even capable of competing with an advanced peer competitor, right? The United States, the slave labor is okay. I mean, okay, if you want to use black slaves to put out your wildfire, it's not even that. Even that's not the best way. The Chinese have advanced drones, and they had advanced like the firefighter robot fire trucks. Robot fire trucks and drones are putting out fires in skyscrapers or anywhere else a fire is, even in remote villages. So the United States using black slaves in California under Biden's crime bill, and Kamala Harris, the top cop, locking up every person of color in California, and being a traitor to her own people, a comprador, and demanding that the black prisoners stay in prison for longer despite nonviolent sentences. That's what Kamala ran on. Slave driver Kamala ran on, enslaving her own people in chains, right? Because she said, and I quote, "We need the labor to do our firefighting and to do our agricultural work. So Kamala is just she's just the Maximus Roman black slave owner trader of California in the 2020s and the 2010s. But that's not conducive, right? You can't have an undereducated, hungry, imprisoned workforce that's going to actually be making the advanced technology. You can't have people that are, not doing very well in school and then going to prison, and then you're going to just throw them into, quantum computing. Right, but this is the belief the West still believes. This is the incorrect Western belief that the Chinese are all just living in mud. All of China is just living in these dusty old huts. They're like barely literate, and the Chinese are just slaving away. The illiterate Chinese are being rounded up, and they push the train uphill both ways in the snow, just like Yeonmi Park says in North Korea. And across in China, everyone is just limping around with no health care, just starving. And they grab some of the starving people and they all chain them up. And the starving, chained up people make the most advanced phones in the world. That's just not how it works. That is just not how it works. Period. And that's just racism, and that's ignorance, and that's illiteracy and ahistoricity of the United States, American, and the collective West, liberal and conservative, all income levels, all political alignments. And it is absolutely not going to work at all. So anyway, long story short, what that means is that the U.S. is going to keep imploding. And the question is, like, it's actually the Chinese and the BRICS, the rest of the global majority, are like, they kind of wish the U.S. would implode a little slower, because it's a little bit dangerous, right? The rate at which the U.S. is imploding, other countries are having to step into leadership roles faster than they would have thought, and so I mean that's from outside, but from inside the United States. Long story short is that a lot of this is like not necessarily stuff that people inside the U.S. have a lot of power over, but in the United States, I mean, that means that, like, building the survivable communities and sovereignty that you can is very important inside of the United States at this moment, as it collapses. Being able to feed yourself, being able to heal whatever you can do in your community to help heal yourself. I mean, those are digital communities, and also in-person communities. Whatever you can do, like, we try to grow as much food as possible as we possibly can here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative. We have been trying to rely on as little, as I often repeat, U.S. government, U.S. capitalist corporate, NGO, nonprofit, academic money to supply our needs as possible. It's impossible to completely disconnect. I mean, even you got to get electricity from somewhere. I mean, having some solar, I mean, it's impossible to not be on Western telecommunications networks of some kind, right? So like I talked about last night, if you're using your sovereignty, your full sovereignty ends the second you connect to the internet. The second you have to your phone, you can be like, oh, I'm on a signal and it's completely free, it's completely safe, I'm completely in control, it's all my data is under mine. Once you connect to any cell tower, once you connect to a satellite, once you connect to your LAN, your local, when you connect to your Comcast, your Spectrum, you're in enemy territory. You're in the Death Star's network. So it's impossible to fully get out of all of that at the current moment, right? I mean, of course, you could do everything completely offline. It'd be fairly difficult in certain types of industries, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do that's not online, like growing food and maintaining the ecology and increasing your food sovereignty and doing other things of that nature. But yeah, because the big beauty, it's not going to be good. A lot of people are going to get thrown off. But somebody also pointed out Biden threw tens of millions of people off of Medicare in the middle of his term too. And a lot of that was because it was like the Democrat Biden administration, right? The so-called better, the so-called lesser evil said, well, we just have to get over this COVID. The pandemic's over. We have to get back to quote unquote normal. And they said, okay, everybody get off of Medicaid now. And, and so that, and also like the Democrats funded at least as much ICE, the increase to the ICE budget under the Democrats was at least as much as Trump is increasing it now. So this is not something that is unique to Trump in particular. The difference between the Republican and the Democrat administrations, as always, is that the Republican and Trump by extension does things without hiding it. And the Democrats talk about how horrible that is when they do the same thing, as Malcolm X correctly described, the fox in the Capitol that is still eating you, right? With the Democrats are still doing big, ugly implosion ultimately, but they're doing it and pretending that it is building back better, and people sometimes believe the Democrats because they're running on the party that cares. So, the party of the minorities and the women and people of color. I mean, it looks like the blue fascism and the red fascism is merging more and more, though. So we're gonna have Demo Republicans soon, possibly. But yeah. So that's there's not a lot that can be done. I would say except to build your own anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist. I mean, if that system, like I was talking about earlier, of a system based upon taking people from their native civilizations, languages, cultures, bringing them into the empire as slaves, at best allowing them to quote unquote buy their slavery after toiling for murderous, grueling, gladiator, making you do forced mortal combat, making you do forced fight to the deaths for money, right? As in Gladiator. And in a lot of ways, essential work is fight to the deaths for money, because you're working until you die from COVID in a job where in 2020 you didn't even have vaccines or masks, and you were forced to do that until you die, and many people did die, right? The most essential, most vulnerable Black and brown workers did die from that. And when white people discovered that actually most of the people were suffering and dying from COVID were Black and brown, they started, the masking dropped and they just stopped caring. That was another interesting statistic that came out in that time. And so if that racist capitalist imperial system of bringing in of exhaling imperial fire through the military, burning and destroying other countries, draining their resources, draining their people in to use as hyper oppressed slave labor, essential labor, et cetera, and also exploiting other just the average workers in your country, if not at the same extent as the incarcerated, as the so-called undocumented immigrant. If that is a system that is in existence and it is destroying the people, it's also destroying itself. Then we have to be moving in the opposite direction, which is an anti-racist global solidarity with all independence, not just so-called American independence, whatever that means. And with the independence of Africa is more important than whatever July 4th means, which is basically just imperialist propaganda at this point. And this jingoistic America GNOCIDE apologism, basically, of Native Americans and of PLESTINEs. And we need to be moving in the direction of anti-capitalism, obviously, which is more people owning collectively and working collectively for the common good, and not for their own individual profit at the expense of other people. It just in general in our daily household and in our businesses that we work in, that we are starting, if you are starting one, and yeah, like it really realistically turning to the United States for things. One of the LA organizers, the anti-ICE organizers, say we need to. I know this is a provocation in the American left, but we need to look less to the United States state governments and the federal government and the local governments. We need to look less to Gavin Newsom and to the mayor of LA, and less to what the Democrats are going to do or any U.S. government is going to do, and more to building our own people power in our own organizations, from person to person at a grassroots level. Because what we're seeing is basically a terminal inability and an unwillingness to by the elites, by the United States, to change this implosion. It's an implosion. Again, it's just selling the U.S. for parts. It's like taking out the motor of the U.S., stripping out the steel and the copper, and selling the copper, at $5 a pound. If the United States is a car, the U.S. elites are ripping out the tires and selling off the tires while the car's still in motion. Right? There's nothing to do with, nothing is going to be made great. Nothing is going to get better. Like I've said this for a long time, but I mean, really, you can see it happening now. Right? There is no plan. There's a lot of words. Oh yeah, we're gonna stick it. We're gonna be growing. American exports are gonna go up. Something. What are you going to export? You don't have anything to export. What are you going to export? Nobody wants to buy your stuff. You don't have anything to export. You're not going to have any. Nobody is going to buy. You already trade warred the entire world. You don't make anything. If you enslave, if America locked up 20 million people, nobody wants to buy things that 20 million slaves produce, because highly trained, highly paid workers are doing the actual work today. There is no future, even in that ugly. We're going to fund the U.S. military. The United States military is incapable of producing the kind of work. Even if 20 million Americans joined the U.S. military, it would be ineffective, because it can't feed the military. B, nobody is paid. Americans hate their own country. The average. I have not seen one. I mean, maybe I'm certain circles. I have not seen one absolutely positive that it wasn't like a total fascist, useless podcast bro type say anything positive. Nobody I've heard assert anything positive about the United States in general, not even on July 4. The United States is not going to be able to recruit whatever military it wants to recruit if it even tried. The United States is deploying Marines to attack American citizens in LA, and the Marines and ICE are losing. The Marines might turn against the United States president, and the U.S. might be entering a civil war, if anything. And nobody wants to sign up to fight for the United States. So there is no plan for the United States. There is even this Cop City, this is almost like even the dark Star Wars Emperor Palpatine Empire version of America. That is also a pipe dream. America is not going to be a solid, even a Nazi Germany is not. America can't even really aspire to that. Nobody believes in that project enough. Nobody who is a competent worker, and also you exist in a different reality than the 1940s. People like nobody is going to sign up for this project. The people are all upset with their country. Like even MAGA is turning against its own leaders, and and the people are not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe in 10, 20 years, I don't know, 5, 10 years. If the U.S. gets bad enough, America can Ukrainify itself or something. It's also possible that the United States will just dissolve into a balkanized California becomes its own state. If California, Washington, Oregon say, we're not going to be part of the United States because we need to trade with China, because basically all our phones, all our vehicles, and all of our farming equipment and everything we need to feed ourselves and operate as California, which is 50% Mexican, 50% not Hispanic, is not white. Everything we need to operate California is like half the U.S. economy. Also, it is the 5th biggest economy in the world at one point. Everything we need to operate California comes from not the United States. All the workers who actually do the work that power America and California are not citizens. They are immigrants. And we need them, and we can't be part of the United States anymore. And so California, we're going to have to break off from the United States. The United States federal government is already at war with California. They're sending the military in already, in one sense, right? The people of California are already at war in the streets, in the Home Depots, in the schools, where the U.S. is trying to round up based upon a racist nightmare pageantry, just trying to steal little brown children out and brown people out of crowds. The United States is already collapsing. Most of the United States already hated both Trump and Biden. They both had less than 50% approval ratings for most of their terms. And all the Congress is at abysmal approval ratings. Everyone's dying from the lack of the absence of healthcare. People have been unaliving CEOs of healthcare companies for the last years, actually. Years. The Brian Thompson wasn't the first. So this idea that, there's not going to be in America, right? If California just says, we're going to not be part of this tariff war, we're going to not be part of this because Trump hasn't got rid of the tariffs. We're going to get the country of California, or the country of California as the Mexican province of California is going to have a zero tariff deal with China so that we can get the machines that we need. And the northern Mexican province of California, or the country of California, is going to have actual sanctuary city. We're going to have full free movement of Central and South Americans to and from California. There will be no ICE. ICE will not be allowed in California because, we simply, the business proposition, the basic economics, we need these Mexicans, we need these immigrants, we need these people that are not white citizens to do the work that we need to be done. Also, we're going to need to work on, why we have so many prison laborers. If California could start working on that, maybe that would be another step, right? It'd be like, California could learn from Mexico. They have a socialist president. They have 80% approval rating because the people's basic material conditions are improving from the Claudia Sheinbaum. And before that, they also had Oprah Sobador. They actually have an openly socialist president. America is trying to denaturalize Mamdani just for saying the word socialism. So California is like, well, we're going to have to break off from the United States of America. And then other states might say, well, California is doing really well. Nobody wants to move to my state, right? Bad Bunny and Megan Thee Stallion, nobody's giving any concerts, and like half the GDP of American states is basically throwing giant parties called concerts, right? Nobody's coming to nobody's coming to my Taylor Swift concert. Nobody's going to play the concert because if I try to play the Bob Dylan concert, everyone could get locked up by ICE. So I'm not saying that that's what will happen, but the possibility of the United States no longer being it's already not unified, but the solidity of the balkanized United States alliance is going to grow. I think the United States is not going to unite into some big imperial power. If the United States united it into some kind of big a mega Nazi Germany, Russia already dealt with one. It's called Ukraine. It actually took all the weapons, all the funds, and all the trained fighters already. It's already gone. It's already been liquidated. It's already being carved up while all liberals are crying into their blue and yellow fucking flags as if they're not fascists. They are. They just supported Stepan Bandera, the descendants of the Ukrainian backers of Hitler. But you're not going to get that. America's not going to get anything. People are too busy. Gym bros are too busy podcasting about the second coming of Mein Führer. None of them are going to fight. None of them are capable of fighting. None of them are militarily trained. None of them are going to be. And even if they became it, you don't have the weapons and you don't have the funding. You don't have the industrial might to be that. Germany was an industrial powerhouse under Nazi Germany. America is industrial nothing. America is a giant collapsing Roman cesspool of lies upon lies upon lies, and people spewing lies and asking ChatGPT to generate more lies as their brains all die. That's not conducive to winning any kind of war or even maintaining control of your own country. So anyway, rip. That's a good place to end. It's already 2:00. Time to go. Thanks everybody for watching. Long story short, build the community with the people that you can, online, offline, everywhere, so we can build people power. And, as in Hawaii, we say, aloha kuleana pono. We need to care for each other. We have to have righteousness and justice, and we have to have our responsibility to each other. Not to any particular country, definitely not to any agglomeration of horrific, self-interested oligarchs that are destroying the world. But to each other as humans, and also to nature and all of the humans, family, all 8 billion people across this earth. You can support us at ko-fi.com/silverspook. You can also help us out at patreon.com/neofeud. And you can also give us, patreon.com/neofeud. You can give us ongoing support, get access to the Silver Spook behind the scenes, such as what we're working on. at the Silver Spook Cooperative. Also, I'm working with Luna. I might be going with the Luna and EJ in the future to. We're working on Neofeud 2, so I have a voice acting from our friends Luna Oy and American Johnson on Neofeud 2, and that's been really fun to direct them in this anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist video game, Neofeud 2, the sequel to Neofeud 1. And of course, we also have Silver Spook. So part of our resiliency, I've been waiting to see what is the US going to just start cutting all of the services, government services, food, supplemental, medical, supplemental, everything, getting rid of everything. So we've been growing as much food as we possibly can. At minimum, we know that we have more than enough sweet potatoes than we could ever possibly eat. We're actually giving away some of that to the neighborhood. That's our little bit of mutual aid. Some of our little bit of mutual aid is just be giving away all the free food that we grow. That's our small attempt to be part of the CCP. Our small attempt to do Kuleana and our responsibility to the neighborhood. We also have free medicinal plants such as aloe, which is deals with burns, and it's a medicinal plant that helps with sunburns too. On top of getting burned by fireworks or lighting matches wrong in an incorrect way. Here is coconuts. These are tea leaves that are used for planting, for markers, for containers, and for fanning, and for in a pinch, in extreme scarcity, the heart of the tea leaf can be eaten as well. And so if you want to support the Silver Spook Native Hawaiian Anti-Imperialist Cooperative, building our resistance to the modern Roman empires and our Hawaiian sovereignty and just normal human sovereignty, you can help us with that. And of course, also help us finish Neofeud 2, which is an educational and entertaining game about all of these topics. And of course, the streaming and the YouTube videos that we do here at Silver Spook Cooperative. You also get access when you become a Silver Spook member to the Silver Spook Discord, and of course Silver Spook University, which is over 1,000 hours of all the indigenous left education that combines decolonized history, current struggles, and imagined futures, and cultural analysis from myself. I'm a Native Hawaiian activist, educator, and obviously sci-fi writer, and also a game developer. So, some of my education gears in certain directions, but everybody has a perspective, and it's important that people know the perspectives people are coming from. One of the Western incorrect ideas is that there is a one truth, right? It's very Roman imperial, right? It's very right. But the reality is there are many different perspectives that people have that need to be listened to, and people need to listen to them and understand that that's where people are coming from. Whenever you hear a voice, like who is that was speaking, so our education at Silver Spook University is what do you need to know today? What do you teach your children? Western lies about past, present, and future permeate formal schooling, modern books and media, and visions of the future are shrouded in a fog of war and collapse. And so this is Hawaiian history. This is a video and also text, and we have all these threads that we've made over the years. Africa focused, Asia focused, America, Turtle Island focused, Pacific focused, true economics, race and gender focused, analysis of the West and how to dismantle imperium, artificial intelligence, social media, and such topics, future from indigenous non-Western perspectives, science fiction, cyberpunk and sci-fi from indigenous BIPOC perspectives, and several other international panels that we have held here at the Silver Spook Cooperative. Anyways, so you can also support us by grabbing Neofeud, which is it's not stale bread. Neofeud is on sale on Steam right now, and it is on sale. So if you want to grab the game, now is a great time to do it. I spent 2.5 years doing the writing, the music, the art, the programming, and half of the voice acting for this game. I am now getting close to being done with the voice acting, which is good. I'm about, I would say about 2/3 done with the voice acting. Thank goodness. So I'm really getting to some of the last casting is a little bit tricky, because I gotta get certain kinds of voices for the last bit, but we're still looking for voices. So if you're still interested in being in Neofeud of voice cast, you want to play a character in Neofeud in voice acting, you can still submit your just submit some examples of your voice acting or your voice to the Silver Spook email or the Discord or somewhere else where I can be contacted. I'm still. I wish I was done, but it's. In my defense, there's 700 pages of script. Okay, so that's a lot. That's like multiple books worth of dialogue. That's I have to cast. You can, if you have a second to leave even a very short review, you can leave it at Steam. It helps to get the game discovered in the Steam algorithm. You can also get Neofeud on itch.io for Windows and Mac and Linux, and also Decolonators is another game that we also released there. And you can get Decolonators and Paging with Gun and several other games on itch, and all of that does help us out. And Woman is a book by Holly, who was raised by in right-wing Christian culture and critiques that culture from the perspective of Mary in the Bible. You can also follow at Silverspoon Games, at wandering.shop, at Silverspoon Games, at mastodon.social. You can also follow on Blue Sky at Silverspook games.bsky.social and at Silverspook guy .bsky.social on the Blue Sky. You can also follow on Twitter, of course. On Twitter, you can follow at Silverspook Games and at Silverspook guy. And you can also follow Holly at Allergic to Blue over there. Allergic, yeah, there you go. At Allergic to Blue. Follow Holly. Always sharing important information. And of course, thank you to all of our Patreon patrons for all your support. Massively appreciate it. Without your support, it's hard to keep doing this work. So thank you so much for all of that. Thanks everybody for. Hey, what's up, Big Teal? Long time no see. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, thanks for coming by. And thanks everybody for watching. Thanks all of our patrons for your support. Until next time, keep your Mercedes polished. Be excellent to each other. Yeah, the U.S. is not doing good. But you know, it's gonna, you know, this was inevitable. And yeah, just, you know, be big, beautiful to each other. That's the best thing that we can get. Be big, beautiful to each other, and let's alter the current system inside the what is currently called the United States. Okay.